If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of three. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth, and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram at FitnessMama, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Today I've got the honour of chatting with Jo, who is, as she describes, an everyday mama who is actually a mother of four, and she has just recently given birth to her fourth baby, and it's her second vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. So Jo shares her really interesting journey in terms of navigating having a second vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you'll know that we have a range of episodes here, cesarean related and vaginal birth. So this episode today is Jo's perspective with navigating the healthcare system. And she has also shed light into how it is to be a mum of 4, her journey to motherhood as a mum of 4, and she does give some great practical tips in terms of how she goes about life with a newborn. So Zaid at the time of recording is only 17 days old, and she's got 3 other young children too. So she describes how she navigates parenthood, how she is in some tips in terms of helping all the children settle into this new routine with a new little baby brother. So anyway, whether or not you're pregnant with your first baby, whether or not you're planning a cesarean birth or a vaginal birth, I really do think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. It was absolutely lovely to chat to Jo, and it's a second episode with her too. She actually came on the podcast a little while ago, it would have been 2 years ago, sharing her journey with a VBA2C. So that was her vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. So that was the birth of her third baby, and now in today's episode, she's sharing the birth of her fourth baby. So I will link her previous episode in the show notes if you're interested in hearing more. Before diving into this episode, I do just want to thank you all again for supporting this podcast along the way. It is now well over 3 years old. We've released well over 200 episodes, and this podcast is now listened to in more than 100 countries around the world. So thank you, each and every one of you who has shared this podcast with a friend, who supported this podcast by giving it a rating and a review. This is probably one of the most important ways to help this podcast reach more people and help more people sharing, rating and reviewing. And at the end of the day, if we can just help one more pregnant or postnatal mama have a wonderful motherhood experience, then that is amazing. So thank you to each and every one of you who has shared it with a pregnant friend, pregnant family member, or who's jumped onto Apple Podcasts or given it a rating and a review. All right, let's dive into today's episode with Jo. Jo, thank you so much for joining me on the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast for round 2 in terms of sharing your birth story. So it wasn't that long ago you shared your lovely vaginal birth after 2 cesarean births. So you're the birth of your third baby, and now we are chatting about the birth of your fourth baby. So congratulations, firstly. I can't believe you wanted to chat so early on. How old is Zaid?
Zaid is actually 17 days old.
Amazing. So usually with these birth stories, I say to whoever, wants to chat, I'm like, let's just give it a few weeks, let me know when you're ready. And Joe, you were like, let's do it.
I'm excited to share my story, and life goes on after 4. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, just on that, how is it being a mum of 4?
I'm not going to lie. It is a juggle. We're still transitioning, trying to find our feet. But I'm very lucky that the other 3 kids are overly obsessed with their brother. So they're all being very protective, probably too protective. But yeah, it's a juggle, but we're getting there so far.
Amazing. So you've got 2 older daughters born by cesarean birth. And then you've got your 3rd baby, Sammy. How old is Sammy now?
Sammy's just on 2.5.
2.5. Okay, so here's your first vaginal birth after cesarean. And now we've got lovely Zaid, who's another vaginal birth after 2 cesareans.
The boys were vaginal births.
So I'm going to leave your episode with your 3rd baby, your VBAC, in the show notes. So although I do want to rehash that, we're going to leave baby number 3 and let's focus on baby number 4, because I think I've spoken to one other mum on this podcast who's a mother of 4. So before we get into the birth, how is pregnancy 4th time around?
To be honest, there were a lot of times where I'd forget that I was pregnant, because when you're a busy mum of 3, life goes on. There were a few things that I had that I didn't have in other pregnancies. So I had varicose veins on my legs, which towards the end were becoming very uncomfortable. I did have the vulvar varicose veins, which I've had in the 2 previous pregnancies before that. But it was really uncomfortable this time around. Like, it was just bulging, and by the end of the day, I'd be in so much pain. But in terms of
what did you do for that, if you don't mind sharing?
I just iced it. Like, basically, end of the day, I'd sit on the sofa and just get an ice pack and put it on. I did purchase the postpartum underpants where they've got the little hole and you put the ice pack on it. I used them as well. But that was really basically all I could do. Like, try to avoid being on your feet for too long, but then not sitting down for too long. So,
yeah. And did you try some compression wear?
I bought some compression stockings, but being in summer, they were too hot to wear. I did have like tight-fitting maternity pants. I did have a pair of compression underpants, but I didn't wear them probably as often as I should.
Yeah, okay. Moving on. So apart from the vulval varicosities, how was your pregnancy?
Yeah, all in all, it was fine. There was no issues, healthy pregnancy. I was still exercising as much as I could, mainly making use of the creche to have time away from the kids, mental break. But movement was definitely, I knew that wanting a vaginal birth, movement was definitely key in order to achieve that. It was towards the end, became a marathon.
Yeah, no doubt. So you had a great experience, is this right, with your 3rd, which was your vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. How was your postnatal recovery? Just quickly, because I know I said I didn't want to talk about your 3rd baby, but I feel it's important when discussing your 4th baby, like your decisions. What happened with birth in terms of, did you have any perineal tears or any pelvic floor symptoms, all that sort of thing?
I had pelvic floor symptoms leading up to the birth. So there was about 2 weeks of incontinence. Straight after, there was a little bit of incontinence also. I did have an episiotomy, so there were stitches, and they were pretty brutal. I'm not going to lie. It was almost 2 weeks of pain. But apart from that, like, I was still able to move. I was walking, driving, doing all the things that you can do.
Yeah, okay. And no long-standing symptoms, pelvic floor symptoms. Okay, great. So you're pregnant with your 3rd. Pregnant with your 4th. You've had a pretty good 3rd experience with your vaginal birth. What were your thoughts in terms of which direction you were going to go, vaginal birth versus cesarean birth?
I knew straight off the bat I was having a vaginal birth. I thought because I had a successful VBAC already that the hospital would be supportive. I thought everyone would be on my side. I've done it. It's all good. So, yeah, there was no doubt in my mind. I was also trying to mimic everything that I did in that third pregnancy, trying to do the same thing, obviously, to get that result.
And so what issues did you run into?
Well, with the hospital, so with the midwives was fine. They did tell me that I'd have to eventually meet up with the doctors to go through the risks of another vaginal birth. But as I said, I thought because I'd already done it, it would be fine. Unfortunately, I had a registrar who just was known for his bad bedside manner. So he was like the head doctor. And in one of the appointments that I had, he said, okay, so you're aware of the risks, aware of uterine rupture, aware of hysterectomy. It could result into cerebral palsy or death of your child. And I was like, yeah, I'm aware of that. And he's like, and you're okay with that? You're fine with that? What does your family think? Where is your family for support? Like the way that he spoke to me, I felt like I was little kid getting in trouble. Like I was just like, oh my goodness. So it did sort of play with my head a little bit. So that was when it all started. So there was a couple of other appointments after that I actually became very anxious about. I didn't want to see him again because of the way that he spoke to me. I had some doctors who were like, well, it's not something we do in this hospital, but they personally supported me. Then I had others who were like, it's your risk you're taking. So I had to sign a form that actually stated that I'm aware of, hysterectomy, death, cerebral palsy, which was very confronting. And then the worst part was that they actually made a mistake on that form. So the next time I went, I had to sign the form again. The only thing that sort of helped me was the fact that I had the support of midwives. So I had a midwife who was present at the birth of my first son. She heard I was back in the hospital. So she was by my side as much as she could to support me. And also I was part of the MAPS program. So I had the midwife that I was seeing regularly, having that continuity of care, that she was also supportive as well.
And this is unfortunately the reality of in Australia, the public versus private scenario, because if you had been private, you would have been able to seek out a doctor who was supportive right from the get-go and then have that, support in your corner, from the very start. Whereas because you are navigating the public health system and you've got different healthcare providers at each appointment, I'm assuming, I can totally see where those challenges would become more complex. Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually did look into a home birth, but because I was a VBAC, I'd had the C-sections, the midwife said, look, she wouldn't be able to get signed off. So even I would never have been that reckless enough to say, you know what, I'm not going through the system. I'm going to do it on my own, because I was aware that there is a 2% chance of a risk of rupture. So I wasn't going to do that. But in the back of my head, those thoughts sort of did creep in because you kind of feel like, not having that support. So.
And I'd love to know, for you, what were the benefits of a vaginal, because you were just told some scary risks, right? So for you, what were the important benefits for her proceeding with the vaginal birth?
Basically, it was because I had the second time around with the C-section, I didn't have support. I felt like I just had to get on with it to look after other kids. So that was really my driving force. And the fact that my daughter actually was supposed to start kindergarten the day that I gave birth. And there's no one here that can help me get the kids to school and so forth. So for me, really, it was about being available for my family, but also just for me, I knew physically that I could do it. So the thought of being cut open and all of that, just because there's that slight chance, I just didn't want to go through all of that. So.
Okay, so primarily it was practical reasons because you didn't have much support.
Yeah.
Was there anyone at home to help you in those at the moment, you're still in those early days with 4 children?
Mum did stay a couple of nights to help out. So I was very appreciative of that. I didn't think that she would, but she stepped up and she did that. So that was really great. Like just having that extra hands to sort of get kids in the car, feed kids, dress kids, all of that did help. But at the same time, I didn't want to rely on it because I knew that, it's not always going to be there. But also hubby has been helping out when he can before he goes to work. So it's not all like I'm left.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So at what stage of your pregnancy was this all happening where you're talking to all your healthcare providers and trying to get a bit of support behind you?
It happened more towards the end. So I think from around like the 30, can't really remember, like it was at least like the 30-week onwards, because it was a continuous thing every week that I'd go and there'd be something different. They're like, oh, we'll see you again. They wanted a growth scan. I had to have a iron infusion because my iron was low. So it was leading up over weeks towards the end. But definitely towards probably like the last 2 weeks of the pregnancy, I really felt the pressure. The pressure was because I had that C-section date booked in, I felt like I was against the clock. So trying to sort of do all the things, like I did acupuncture, I was curb walking, going to the gym every single day, walking on the stairs, doing everything. It was until I spoke to my midwife, actually the morning before I went into labour, and she said to me that this baby is not going to come because you're feeling the pressure. You're stressed. You need to let that go. That date's not happening. And when I left the appointment, I literally felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. And that night I went into labour. So
I didn't realise this. You had your caesarean birth booked in, and so therefore you felt the pressure that you had to give birth before your caesarean date.
That was the thing.
Yeah, wow.
I did actually make a comment, and they actually put the notes on my file saying that I wasn't coming to the C-section, which I didn't know how I felt about it. Like I was scared, but that's why I had to block it out and just focus on being positive, having a positive mindset. And it really is amazing. Like once I let go of that sort of that negative feeling, it all happened. So I have learned that, the power of the mind is definitely, something that I guess we take for granted for.
And what, out of interest, when was a caesarean booked? At what stage of gestation?
So it was 40 days, 40 weeks. I think it was one day. It was 1 day over. They were pretty firm. They were not going to let me go over. I tried to negotiate 3 days or 5 days. I tried to book the C-section date so it would fit in my schedule. And they were, oh, no, logistically that's not going to work for us, so we're going to do it on this date. So I didn't even have a choice in that. So
this episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months. Yes, that's 9 months. They also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Okay,
yeah.
So you're a few days leading up to the day. Can you talk me through what happened? Talk us through. Take us on the journey, Jo.
So the clock's ticking. I'm feeling pressured. At a point, I'm scared because the reality is that, yes, something can go wrong, but I'm stubborn. So I was just doing, as I said, anything I can. My focus was getting baby out. So I did acupuncture, I think 2 or 3 times. I saw a homeopath. I was meditating, which I never do. I was walking. I actually lost weight towards the end with the amount of like just not eating, stress, and exercise that I was doing. I was expressing. I was downing raspberry leaf tea like no tomorrow, and I was craving eating dates, and just really trying to have just block out any negativity, not having stress, just trying to have those moments for myself. But as I said, in the back of my head, it's like, wait, what is this going to happen? What's going to happen? I had moments where false labor was starting. I would get excited and then it would go away. So yeah, that was the journey.
You did all the things. And when did you go into labor? How did you know you were in labor?
So I had to go in for some monitoring. So on a Sunday afternoon, I got a bit worried because I thought I hadn't felt the baby move as much. So I went into the hospital and we agreed that I was having daily CTG monitoring. So I went in and I actually had asked for a stretch and sweep. So that was on a Monday morning. They had a midwife appointment, then had the stretch and sweep, did the monitoring, went home, actually went to IKEA first, then went home. Around 5 p.m., I was eating dinner and I was getting a lot of cramping. I stood up and just a gush came out. I thought, oh, is this my water? No, it was just a weak bladder. So I called the hospital. They looked, just see how you go. They were just thinking it was because of the stretch and sweep. So by 7:30, 8 o'clock, the contractions were getting a little bit more intense. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is something, maybe something's happening. So my mum said she'll stay. And then by midnight, 11 o'clock, I went to bed. I couldn't sleep. I was moaning. I had put the TENS machine on, so I had the TENS machine to help me. But it was just so intense. And I thought, okay, I think I should call the hospital. So at 12:30, I called them. I was on the phone. I'm like, I don't want to come in too early. I'm scared I don't want to come in too early. And she's like, honey, you've had 2 contractions in the matter of like a minute. It's time. You need to come. Got to the hospital at 1:08. I was 6 centimeters dilated. My midwife, who was working emergency, got the call that I was there. She came running up, got me into the room furthest away from everyone. Around maybe like an hour later, my water broke. And then I gave birth at 3:13 a.m.
Wow. So how were you feeling when you realised this is it, I'm actually in labour? Were you scared or relieved?
I was scared, relieved. I went through like a roller coaster of emotions. I remember thinking to myself, I can't do this. The pain, like the contractions were a lot harder than the first vaginal birth. I remember at one point going, oh my God, like I think I need something else. But then I remembered I can actually increase the intensity on the TENS machine. So I had the TENS machine, the comb, that actually really helped just squeezing through those surges. And I also had a roller of essential oils that I was like sniffing every so often. We had the room lit up with tea light kit, like with the fairy lights, and I had my affirmations all stuck around, which was helpful in the beginning. Then I was at one stage, I'm like, where are those goddamn affirmations? And I'm like, oh, stuff it, I can do this. Yeah, pushing him out, they were like, just keep going, keep going, keep going. And I was so tired. And I told myself that just push, just get this baby out, then you can sleep. So I did have a few grazes because I was pretty like intensely like roaring, like, and pushing him out. But as soon as he came out, hubby caught him. I took him out of my husband's hand and held him up, and I didn't even know what he was. And I was just like, oh my God, you're here and you're safe and you're fine. Like, and I did it. Like, it was just the most amazing feeling. The fact that I got to do it again, but the fact that there was so much push that, oh, your baby's going to die. And it's like, I'm holding him here. He's here. So, getting emotional, actually. It was beautiful. Like, it was everything that I could absolutely ask for.
Oh, that's beautiful. I wish I could hand you tissues.
Sorry. Oh, just hormones.
So you're holding your baby to your chest.
Yeah. Didn't even know what it was. And then I looked, I'm like, oh my God, it's a boy. And then I got onto the bed, still holding him, like not letting him go. I don't care. Like, hubby, you wait your turn. I fought so hard for this. And then I had the placenta come out and they realised that I had a few tears, so they had to stitch me up. I'm just like, you do what you need to do. I'm not looking. I'm just looking at this perfect little baby. And then I had one of the doctors who was on call that night. He came and popped his head in and he was like, oh, you did it. Oh, good work. And walked out. I was like, yes, I did. And I was like, oh.
Amazing. It must have just been such a feeling of euphoria for you.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Do you still feel like that?
I do. Like, I look at him and I just think, oh my goodness, like, you're so tiny. It was not so long ago that you were in my stomach kicking around and now you're here, and it is just a perfect little boy. So completed the family, like, I'm done. That's it. Hubby can go get the snip.
That's lovely. And how was breastfeeding fourth time around?
He took a little bit to sort of latch on. His, my nipples a bit big for his tiny little mouth. But he just had a check today and he's like doubled his birth weight. So we're doing good. It's for me like fourth time. I'm kind of used to it. But yeah, he's doing good.
What's harder, pregnancy, birth, or motherhood for you?
Motherhood. Definitely. Trying to fill everyone's cup. Everyone, like, the girls are going through, one's just very emotional at the moment. The other's just started school, so she's going through that transition. My son is equivalent to 2 children. Like, he's just going through that terrible 2 stage. So it's trying to be there for everyone and being calm about it. I'm trying to sort of work on my parenting skills, but, not the right time. But that's, definitely most challenging.
And considering you're only 17 days postpartum, do you feel you are able to like relax, restore, rejuvenate? Like, with 4 children, are you able to take any time out for you?
I'm trying. I'm definitely trying to be mindful. Like, my son goes to daycare Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I'm like, even if I can just sit on the couch for half an hour and watch TV while I'm breastfeeding Zaid, that's enough for me. Some days it happens, some days it doesn't. But yeah, it's definitely normally I wouldn't take that time for myself, but I know that I need it. Physically I need it, and mentally I need it as well.
Yeah, good. How's the lying down breastfeeding going?
So I've actually with my second, I learned how to lie down breastfeed. So it's not new to me. So
yeah.
We're good with that, yeah.
For me, that's the magic bullet for busy mums and resting. Like, giving the pelvic floor a rest is getting horizontal, and you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So
that's actually one thing I remember from your podcast. So
good. So how is motherhood different? I want to discuss, you've got an incredible motherhood story. I'm sure you've got so many pearls of wisdom, whatever the term is, for parents listening today. What has changed in your parenting style with a 4th time newborn versus your 1st time newborn?
First time around, like, obviously you've got all the time in the world for this one child. You can give them everything. Now with 4 children, I need to spread myself around. So what I actually try to do now is, with my girls, I've made a rule that at the end of the day, when I put them to bed, we'll spend a couple of minutes where we talk about our day, the highs, the lows, just to have that quality time with them. Even with my son, even though he's really pushing my buttons at the moment, we go Mondays, Tuesdays, we go on a morning walk together. So that's my time with him. So it's definitely about just making that, even if it's just a couple of minutes with each child, just to give that, so they still feel that they're, a part of it, they're not missing out. Mummy's always with the baby. That's definitely one thing that I've learned to, just so they feel still not neglected.
But even just a few minutes for each child, it sounds like not much, but I try to do that with 3 children, and by the time you get them home from school, you've given them dinner, then you're trying to tidy up, and then suddenly you're thinking, right, I need to spend some quality time with each child, and it's already 6 o'clock at night.
It's hard. Even sometimes, like my daughter does dancing, so in the car, we'll have a conversation. I ask, how was your day? What fun things did you do today? Sort of thing. Like it's because sometimes I've noticed with my kids, it doesn't have to be a long time. They just sometimes just want that little bit of attention, even if it's literally like a couple of minutes of playing Barbie dolls with them, or I clean the Barbie doll house, but sort of pretend I'm playing with them as well. So you've just got to try to find that moment and just sort of make it work.
Yeah. So would you agree that actual baby side of things is getting easier with each child you have? Because obviously for your first, you're learning everything, and it's lucky that you do only have one, because you need all your time to dedicate to learning everything, with a newborn baby. And then with 2, you've learned a bit. With 3, you've learned even more. Do you finding, is what I'm saying resonating with you in terms of the baby side of thing gets easier, but it's more the juggling everything as a mother that gets harder?
Thankfully at the moment, he's just sleeps like a lot throughout the day. So at this stage, it is easy, but obviously, let's have a conversation maybe 6 weeks time. Things might be good.
And that's the thing with motherhood; it just keeps changing, doesn't it?
You just don't know. So, I think that's it's more as they get older, they have different needs, different feelings, different. It's always an ongoing one, isn't it?
Okay, so you have shared your second vaginal birth after a cesarean. You certainly had some hurdles along the way. Do you have any tips for pregnant women? Not necessarily if they want to have a VBAC, but just any tips at all for anyone who might be listening to today's podcast episode?
Definitely, it's important to take time for yourself and don't feel guilty about it. Being pregnant, I enjoyed it. I had was blessed to have a pretty easy pregnancy, but I made sure that whenever I could, I had that time for me, because I knew once the baby's coming, things are going to change. So I tried to sort of look after myself mentally, physically, as much as I possibly could. So if going to the gym is your thing, definitely do that, or go for a walk, or schedule time to get a pedicure or a massage or a facial or whatever your thing is, but definitely making that time for yourself.
Yeah, love that. Perfect way to end. How can everyone come and find you, Jo, if they want to come and connect?
They can find me on Instagram _everyday_mama. I share things health related, mum related. I try to keep it as real as possible. I'm very, very open. So you can find me there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really value it. I know you're a busy mum of 4. Congratulations again on the birth of little Zaid. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer: materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'll see you soon.